Hello, comrades, and welcome to another video on the Chinese Revolution Area of Study 1. In this video, we'll be exploring the presidency of Yuan Shikai from 1912 to 1916. Here is Yuan pictured. He was the Republic of China's first president, if you don't count the provisional presidency of Sun Yat-sen. But he was sworn in as president in March 1912. So let's get straight into it. Firstly, the key knowledge points that this video will cover are Yuan Shikai, obviously, as well as challenges to the early Republican era. Now, it should be noted that the early Republican era really ranges from like 1912 to 1926, 27. And so that includes the presidency of Yuan Shikai, as well as the warlord period, the warlord decade. And so we'll see challenges after the presidency of Yuan Shikai as well, but Yuan Shikai's presidency presented the first challenge to the early Republican era. So let's get straight into it. Yuan's government. After the 1911 revolution, Yuan Shikai was sworn in as president on the 10th of March, 1912. As I mentioned in my last video, this is after he had secured the abdication of Pu Yi in February 1912. And so once Yuan came into power, his government introduced a number of modernizing projects, including reforming the legal system, suppressing opium farming, encouraging primary education, centralizing the national currency, and increasing crop yields through irrigation and flood control projects. So he did make some positive changes through these modernizing projects, but his positive leadership didn't last all that long. Yuan's firm leadership was praised in the British press. Yuanity became a slogan for unity and strength. Yuan was ambitious and domineering and had no intention of bringing about a democratic republican system. So remember that with Sun Yat-sen's three principles of the people, Sun endorsed 3 years of a military dictatorship, hence why he was so willing to step down as provisional president in favor of Yuan Shikai, who was a military general, and then 6 years of a tutelage period in which they sort of test out democratic principles. And so Yuan was meant to come in as this military dictator and phase out military dictatorship towards a democratic republican system, but he had no intention of doing so. The Guomindang. So Sun Yat-sen was appointed Minister of Railways under Yuan Shikai's government. He remained the leader of the Republicans, but responsibility for day-to-day political matters fell to Song Jiaoren. Song began preparing the revolutionary movement for parliamentary politics, feeling like the 1911 Jinhai Revolution was over, the imperial system had come to an end, and so he turned the Revolutionary Alliance into a modern political party. In August 1912, the Tongmenghui, remember that was Sun Yat-sen's Revolutionary Alliance, was combined with smaller parties to become the GMD, or the Guomindang. Parliamentary elections were set for January 1913, and the GMD gained a majority of seats. Song was chosen to serve as prime minister. However, Yuan Shikai had no intention of allowing the parliament to obstruct his rule. He was quite power hungry, as can be inferred through his fighting for being commander-in-chief of the Qing army, while also negotiating with the revolutionary groups during the 1911 revolution. So playing both sides so that he could gain more power. Song Jiaoren was assassinated on the 20th of March, 1913. And while there's no evidence for this, he was probably assassinated by one of Yuan's henchmen. Failure of the Second Revolution. So in July 1913, the Guomindang-backed provincial governor of Jiangxi declared independence from Yuan's government. Within a month, more provinces rebelled, but Yuan Shikai's armies easily put down these rebellions. On the 4th of November 1913, Yuan banned the Guomindang as a political party. In January 1914, he dissolved the national and provincial parliaments, again, gaining more power for himself. And by May 1914, Yuan had secured a new constitution extending his term as president from 5 to 10 years. So that throws out Sun Yat-sen's principle of democracy and the sort of phasing in of democratic principles. And this also granted him increased powers over military, diplomatic, and financial decisions. Japan's 21 demands. So on the 18th of February 1915, Japan presented 21 demands to China in return for granting loans to China. These included extensive rights to economic development in Manchuria, control over mining in central China, control over the Liaodong Peninsula near Korea, as well as the right to appoint Japanese advisors to the Chinese government. Now, they are just 4 of the 21 demands, so I encourage you to have a look in your textbook to find out a bit more about the other demands presented to Yuan's government. Now, Yuan rejected the demands for Japanese advisors in China's administration. Again, he was power hungry. He didn't want Japanese advisors, but he did accept the economic conditions. So those first 3 demands, as well as others, he accepted. Now, this outraged many Chinese. Remember that China was done with foreign intervention. The Chinese were sick of these foreign nations having a say in what happens in China. And so this led to protests throughout China. A day of shame was announced on the 7th of May, 1915, when the 21 demands were signed. And I should note that for years after 1915, the 7th of May was set aside for Day of Shame rallies. A new emperor. So Yuan sought to start a new imperial dynasty with himself as emperor. He took to performing the rituals of an emperor at the Qing Temple of Heaven and planned for the reintroduction of Confucianism into official proceedings. He started to wear imperial gowns. He had imperial teacups and really tried to position himself and frame himself as emperor of China. On the 1st of January 1916, Yuan assumed the title of emperor. Now, after the Xinhai Revolution, people were not in favor of a new emperor. They wanted a republican government. So many of Yuan's generals and provincial governors voiced their disapproval and declared independence from Yuan's government. Yuan was forced to renounce his claim to the throne on the 22nd of March 1916. And on the 6th of June 1916, Yuan died from kidney disease. Now, he was a complicated individual, Yuan Shikai. He can really be considered China's last emperor, although Puyi really was the last emperor with a true claim to the throne. But for all his faults, Yuan Shikai had held China together. And after his death, regional tensions rose again, and China became divided into autonomous areas controlled by warlords. And this marked the beginning of the warlord period. So our next video is going to explore the warlord period and the problems that came with that. And in future videos, we will find out about how the warlord decade came to an end and how the Guomindang took control of China. I hope you found this video interesting and useful, and I will see you next time.